your most comfortable posture, one that feels the most natural for you. You can sit balanced and at ease. Take a few deep breaths just to settle yourself in. Might have come in tonight and we may be carrying a lot with us. Thoughts of things we needed to do, things that happen throughout the day, underlying responsibilities or burdens that we might have. Whatever you've carried into this session, just see if you can put it down for now. It's quite rare that you get this opportunity to practice. We have so many hours in the day, but we don't spend much of that time practicing meditation. So whatever time you do get, it's precious. So any of these things that are concerning you, that you've carried in, just put that aside, because again, this time is precious. Trying to use this time to improve the quality of our experience, improve our mind. Just settle on whatever method of meditation that you usually use. Allow yourself some stability, some ease, some calm. That might be the breath, might be a mantra, might be observing sensations, whatever you usually find that works for you. Just settle in on that particular meditation object now. truly one of the hardest things in the world to do is to train the mind. And sometimes when our attention slips away, we can become despondent. But because it is one of the hardest things to do to actually train the mind, see if instead you can try to give yourself a little encouragement every time you do notice that you've drifted off and you come back. Try to feel good about yourself that you can do this meditation thing reasonably well. The proofs in you becoming mindful again. So see if you can feel a little bit good every time you do bring the mind back. Just like if a puppy dog sat when we told it to sit, we'd give it a pat. So too with our minds when it does come back and do what we want it to do. See if you can give it that little pat of encouragement. as we sit and things start to quieten down a bit, you might even be meditating and the mind starting to become somewhat calmer. You might notice that in the background there's always this little voice, this running commentary that's interpreting your experience, commenting and creating a narrative. This inner commenter shapes our whole experience of existence. Either for good or for ill. If you catch that little voice, look into it. What is it? Where is its source? Is it reliable? Or is it just noise? Is it something you should listen to? Is it something you should believe? Try to look deep to find what it is. If you don't know what it is, why do you listen to it? Why does it run your life? this little voice inside. It has ultimate control over your whole life. It tells you what to do, what to feel. It essentially tells you how the whole world is. And we believe every word of it. We do exactly what it says. But what happens when you look into it? See it for its tricks. Do you have to believe everything it says? Do everything it wants? Is this really you? Or is it just thought? What's behind this little voice? What happens when you don't let it control you? Can everything just be without this inner controller? Good. Hope you had a nice sit. As we're gradually coming back in the room, Langdon can fill your head with information.
Now, all the announcements. Are there any questions here in the hall?
Langdon?
Hi, Ajahn.
Hey.
Thank you very much for the meditation.
No
This question doesn't relate to the meditation as practiced tonight, but it relates to I think, an event that occurred probably within the last week. So recently, I think it's been about the 1 year anniversary of the failed voice referendum that happened in this country.
Yep.
And I just I have been curious as to what what a Buddhist perspective is on inherited responsibility, or rather, I guess, and what I mean by that is, so to what extent, let's say your ancestors committed certain acts against another people, and I guess what responsibility, or what is responsibility do you as a descendant have to make up for those acts, at least from a Buddhist perspective? And this is something that's not just applicable to Australia, but I guess to other relationships between descendants of both settlers and colonized peoples in other countries around the world.
Cool. So just so I'm understanding right, so is the question like a Buddhist perspective on what one's responsibility is for historical injustices that have happened if you're in that direct family line, or if you're in that?
I would say yes. I guess probably the biblical term, I guess, I was trying to find another way of describing this, but I guess the biblical term for it is the sins of the father.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a direct family.
Yeah. So I would probably say. So I'll give to be more precise. In my particular case, I am convict descendant, and it's something that I've often wondered to myself. I know from a Buddhist perspective that, if I do anything directly harming another person, I should make up for that.
Yep.
But I'm wondering, what responsibility do I have for maybe the harms of my ancestors, especially towards the communities within this country?
Yeah. So it is an interesting question, because, we have to, if we think it, so again, I'll only answer this through a Buddhist lens.
Yep.
Because
there's
many different ways I could answer this, and many different perspectives you can take on this. And so I think this is only really like a Buddhist perspective, and let's call it a Theravada Buddhist perspective as well. So from the Theravada Buddhist perspective, is we sort of where we have this idea that essentially that if you still have ignorance within the mind, you're going to be reborn again over and over, and you could have been many different instantiations of many different people or beings and all these kinds of things. And so who you specifically were throughout the generations of people, that's something that's really, really hard to say. But then also that, okay, well, yeah, you have karmic connection with a whole other host of, going back through that sort of lineage, you have karmic connection with many people, many beings through that. And so the idea from that Buddhist perspective is that, you're only sort of really responsible for your own karma to some extent. And so in saying that, though, you don't really know what your karma was in the past either. So because then if we're actually extending that out to like people that we had like karmic influences with, i.e. family members and things like that, this is also something that we don't really know. Now, can we know specifically like our own kind of, from a historical perspective, our genetic lineage, my father, my father's father, blah, 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 all those back. Yeah, we can obviously know that. But from a Buddhist perspective, it's like we don't know what kind of karmic causes we have with these people anymore. So it's hard from a Buddhist perspective to go, well, I have some sort of associated karma there. Now, look, I think an easier answer to that, though, is like, well, there's got to be some kind of karmic connection, because through the whole causal chain of events, you know, this person led to that person led to that person led to you, kind of thing. So I think there's that element there. It's like we share some kind of karmic responsibility for that, or we share in the karma of that. But then it's just a matter of like, how far back do you want to go? Like, you know, karma from this perspective, from this Buddhist perspective, you know, again, from a Buddhist perspective, it's incalculable. The kind of relations we've had, the kind of people that have been members of the family, it's absolutely incalculable. And you sort of think that's like, well, actually in some way we're all connected to each other in some sort of karmic sense. So in some way, I think then, you know, you as an individual are kind of responsible for many things in existence as well, or you've been a part of that, or at least you share some of that. And so what do you do? And so now, you know, now the question is, well, what do you do? What do you do with that kind of responsibility? It's like, well, yeah, actually you do carry that weight of karmic responsibility, not only your own and your own kind of lineage and your own kind of broader causal karma of just sort of being a being that's in existence that has sort of, you know, come about. And so you do have that kind of responsibility. Well, yeah, how do I make the world a little bit better? How do I act in the world in some kind of way that does improve things? Now, obviously, I can't change the past. That's just, you just can't do that. And again, what part of the past do you want to actually fix? You know, you can go so far back that it's, so far back that it sort of means nothing. You can go so far forward that it also sort of can, you know, mean very little. But what you really have is your current actions that you can actually do now. And if you feel like there's something that, you know, can be improved in some kind of way, then you do have a responsibility to do that, I think. If you feel like it's something as this is a wrong that should be righted, yeah, you do have a responsibility to do that. So again, this is just from this like a Buddhist perspective on this. It's like the whole kind of chain of karma going back. It's really hard to untangle all that. So in some way, all these different events have sort of led to you being here. And so this is messy. So what can you do? You can't do much with all this mess, but you can maybe see that it's like, well, there's been these things in the past that I can learn from, and how I go forward now. You know, I have to take responsibility for that. So it's not a clear answer of, you know, should you do X, Y, and Z to repatriate for the past, but it's more about what can I do now, seeing the ills of the world that have been, and what can I do now to actually go forward with that.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Thank you for that.
No problem.
There are no questions online at the moment. Are there any other questions in the hall?
Yeah, I was just wondering, when we're meditating and our mind starts to get a little bit concentrated,
Yep.
does our effort level need to change, in the sense, like if you keep trying too hard, but it's already sort of like not wandering as much, do we ease up a little bit at that stage, or?
Yeah. So it's a good question. So essentially, what you'll hopefully start to notice is when the mind does start to become a little bit calmer, then like there's more of a sense of ease with everything. There's more of a kind of a loosening and relaxing in that period of time. And so one thing that we can kind of do is to sort of to let go of that kind of you could say like directed control to some extent. You can start to, just sort of loosen your grip on that and sort of like ease into it somewhat. So there's nothing wrong with doing that. Then there's another way to go about it of like, okay, well it's things are starting to calm down a little bit now. Like I'll actually like focus in more at that point. It really just depends which way you want to go. Some people they just find it easier to keep letting things go, like keep letting things slip away, keep like loosening that grip in that way, and that will make them sort of like go down further. Other people, it's a little bit different where it's like, okay, I'm starting to calm. Actually, what I need to do is like pull that down even further. And so both ways can work. So I think it's more just a matter of finding specifically what works for you. What you don't really want to do is like put in this kind of like extra top-down effort. This kind of like, oh, I'm getting calm now. I really need to like push down into this thing. I really need to like control it even more. You don't really want to be doing that, because then you're sort of introducing this kind of this kind of like agitation to it, and that's sort of going to be going in the opposite direction. And that's usually when you find you sort of break that calm. But more what I'm saying with that kind of like focusing in calm, it's not a kind of forcing in that way. It's a kind of enveloping, the thing, and it's just becoming like more and more refined. So you just have to try around with like what different things might work for you. Like some days, and it might even not necessarily be, this is definitely the way for me. It's like some days enveloping a little bit more will work. Some days just like letting things go and letting it like drop back and relax a little bit will work a bit more. So just play around with it. Obviously the kind of litmus test with this is like, well, whatever you're doing, if it's pulling you out of the calm, that's the wrong thing to do. But whatever you do and it sort of takes you to a deeper level of calm, it's like, okay, that's the right thing to do. So that's always the kind of litmus test that you have with these things. So yeah. So which do you usually find sort of works for you?
I think it depends, a bit on the day. I think I find it harder at the start once things get concentrated. I think I've had moments where I've tried too hard when things are getting calm, and then I sort of agitated my mind again. And then other times where I think even during the same meditation, I fluctuate a bit, try hard and then let go. I guess, sort of, because sometimes the trying hard sort of makes me feel more stressed, and then I let it go and then relax for a bit, and then
for sure. And that's the thing, is like, again, so it's a bit of a balancing act, So trying too hard, you can get like a little bit stressed and you can become more agitated. Trying even less though, you can get sort of like drowsy and lethargic, and you can sort of like drift off kind of thing. So again, kind of really just a kind of balancing act. Sometimes you'll need to do a little bit more of one or the other. Yeah, go for it. It's just for the online people so they can hear.
Thanks for the discussion so
That's
far.
Yep.
My question was just regarding, so during the meditation you mentioned that there's sometimes an inner voice that you have.
Yep.
And I find that I can definitely hear that more when I'm meditating.
Yep.
It's definitely louder and takes up a bit of my concentration as well. But just in terms of going about day-to-day activities and things, what's the best approach? So obviously that thought, or that it's probably just your stream of consciousness.
Yep.
But from a Buddhist perspective, what's the best way to manage that?
Yeah.
I guess a lot of the time, like your intuition comes and plays a big part in making your decisions. But say if you're at work or something, and that voice is sometimes important, how do you manage that?
Yeah, good question. Because look, it's not like it's some kind of kind of enemy that never needs to be listened to. Because it's like, sometimes it might say to you, it's like, don't scream at this person, like. So it tells you, it does tell you good, useful things sometimes. More along the lines of what we should at least try to uncover with it Because for most people, like, this voice sort of drives them in everything that they do in life, and they sort of have no idea that it's like you've been controlled and you've been driven by this thing. And there's no sort of time to stop and go, like, actually, like, what is that? What really is that thing that keeps controlling me, that keeps telling me to do this and do that, and interpreting the world in this kind of way. Most people never really sort of stop and look at that and start to realize that, like, this thing is shaping my existence. And so it really is a matter of being able to tune into this thing and go, like, when is it useful to listen to this thing and when is it not? As opposed to it being like me. It's a tool. It's something that's there that can either help or can hinder you. But most people sort of wrap that voice up with, like, me, that, like, that this is me. And if you wrap it up with being me, then you'll always believe it. It's like, because it's me, it's this kind of the innermost feeling friend of who I am. So you'll always believe it. So recognizing what it is and being able to sort of just see it for what it is, just this kind of like language that comes up in the mind, then you have a bit more of a choice. It's like, do I listen to this thing or don't I listen to this thing? Is it telling me something useful about the world, or is it sort of like just shaping and giving like a negative commentary on the world? And so, look, yeah, there's times, obviously, you go to work and it's like, okay, my boss has told me to do this. So I need to just like think through this problem and I need to do this. But again, it's just seeing, like, when is it useful and when is it not? When should I believe it and when shouldn't I believe it? Because it is just like a running commentary. It's just this kind of running, like babble. It's just basically like babble, but we believe all the babble. So it's more a matter of like, okay, can I sort of separate from this thing and see, okay, is the babble telling me to do something useful? Yeah, okay, I do that thing. Fine. If it's telling me to do not something useful, I don't need to listen to it. So it's more about that, and instead of being pulled around by it, you're able to sort of step back and go, no, this is I'm not going to be pulled by this thing anymore. I'm going to sort of act in the world in this kind of way, and whatever I sort of experience, I don't need it colored by this thing. So yeah, does that make sense? Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, it's hard. So it's hard to say. So most people will identify it as a. So, and just quickly for the people online, the question was so what actually is it? What is that babble? So I think if we sort of like look deeply into it, like most of the time we feel like it's like this is sort of like the me that's at the center of existence. This kind of, I feel like the one that's saying this thing. Now you can say it's a stream of consciousness because it's this kind of like just constant thought that goes on and on. So it's something I think each of us needs to actually like look into. Like for me, at least, what I think it is, it's just it's just like language appearing in the mind. So it is just thought, but this thought, because it's only occurring to me and it's sort of happening at the center of my existence, I think that thought is me. And so really it's just sort of thought that's occurring. Just like if you stand out on the street or something and you hear lots of sounds and you go in the experiment I like to do is like go into a very busy like train station or something, and or a football match. I don't go to football matches, but where there's a lot of people, or a shopping center or something where there's a lot of people, and you hear people talking. You hear this kind of like stream of like people going and coming and going, and it's just sort of noise. And yeah, when you meditate, you realize it's sort of like that. It's sort of like just this like stream of noise, but it's noise masquerading as language. So when we sort of like drop all other like sensory modalities, like essentially like our brain keeps working. and we start to like see patterns and all these kinds of things, and you know, you can hear hallucinations, hear sounds, and you'll just sort of have this voice there. But I think it's just the kind of the activity of the brain that keeps like going on, but it's coming out as language. And so if you sort of look into that again, because it feels so intimate, like it feels like it's me doing the speaking, whereas in reality it's just sort of like thought. It's just sort of activity that's there. From a Buddhist perspective, what we'd call this is mano, what's called mano sankhara, which is like a mental activity. That's all that thing is. But because it's to us, it's like a friend. It's that thing that, you know, most of the time it keeps you safe. It's like it tells you to go and eat something. It tells you that I'm tired. It tells me, oh, this person is my friend. It tells me, okay, this is my mother. I should listen to my mother. It tells us all these things, like we've grown up with it, like we've had it since we could speak. And so it's like it's our most intimate and like personal, like friend and confidant, that we just believe it all the time. But, you know, the reality is it's just thought, like it's just activity, it's just thought. And so again, it's a kind of like, well, what is the thing? And I think that is the crucial question. Like that's what you have to ask yourself. That's what you have to look into your own experience. And I'm just giving you my interpretation of it. You have to sort of look in, it's like, well, what is that thing? Like truly, what is it? If I peek behind the curtain of that voice, what actually is it? And that's where most of us get a surprise. It's sort of nothing there. And so, yeah, everybody has to sort of like look into it. So, yeah, so you can call it a stream of consciousness. You can call it like a subjective feeling of self. You can call it like a, you know, sort of the activity of thought. But it's really about sort of like looking into it and actually seeing what it is. And then when you can do that, it's like, it loses all its power. And again, because this thing has like total power over your whole life. But once you can actually look into it, it's like, it loses all its power. But that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing of like, now I don't know what to do. But it's like, it loses its power to control you. It loses its power to shape and interpret the world according to its own whims. And so when you can do that, that's when things become freeing. And so, yeah, it's, you know, what it is in some way, like, doesn't matter to some extent, because it is just like activity. It's when you see behind that's what matters more. Does that make sense? Okay. If that's the case, then we're pretty much on 9 o'clock-ish, so might call it a night. So thanks to everybody for coming. Good questions tonight. Yeah, very good. So we'll see you all next time we see each other again in this endless cycle of existence. Hey, good night, everyone.